Ambassador Hyojin Choi stood in the center of the Great Hall on Station Omega-7, waiting for the Galactic Council to deliver their final decision about Earth and its people. The massive chamber stretched out before her with walls made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Representatives from 17 different alien species sat in a perfect circle around the speaking platform where she waited. Some looked like giant insects with clicking mandibles, while others appeared as floating clouds of energy contained within metal shells. The Vorthak messenger stood at the center, holding a device that would translate the Council's words into human language. Hyojin had been Earth's ambassador to the galactic community for 5 years now, ever since first contact had been established. She remembered that day clearly when the alien ships had appeared in Earth's sky not with weapons or threats, but with offers of knowledge and trade. The humans had been so excited to learn they were not alone in the universe. Now as she stood here, she wondered if that excitement had been a terrible mistake. The Vorthak was a being made of what looked like living crystal that could shift its shape at will. Today it had chosen a form that somewhat resembled a human, but taller and with too many angles. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with the distant rumble of thunder. The Galactic Council has reached its decision regarding the species known as humans from the planet Earth, the Vorthak announced. The translation device made its words sound cold and final. After extensive study and debate spanning 3 standard galactic years, we have determined that humanity poses a significant threat to galactic peace and stability. Hyojin felt her heart sink, but she kept her face calm. She had feared this moment might come. Earth's military history was well documented, and she knew some species found human warfare tactics disturbing. Still, she had hoped their diplomatic efforts would count for something. The evidence is clear, continued the Vorthak. Humans display levels of aggression and unpredictability that far exceed acceptable parameters for free species. Your wars have been studied in detail. Your weapons development shows a concerning pattern of escalation. Most troubling is your species' tendency to fight even when victory seems impossible. The ambassador from the Kelrani species made a sound that the translator rendered as agreement. The Kelrani looked like oversized butterflies but with metallic wings and multiple eyes. Their representative had always been polite to Hyojin, but she could see now that politeness had hidden fear. However, the Vorthak went on, the Council recognizes that humans possess certain valuable traits. Your physical strength is impressive. Your ability to work in harsh conditions is noteworthy. Your reproductive rate could help address labor shortages on several worlds. Hyojin felt a chill run down her spine. She was beginning to understand where this was leading, and it was worse than she had imagined. Therefore, the Galactic Council has voted unanimously to place humanity under protective custody. This is not punishment, but rather a necessary measure to ensure both human welfare and galactic security. Humans will be relocated to appropriate worlds where they can contribute meaningfully to galactic society under proper supervision. The word relocated hit Hyojin like a physical blow. She had to grip the speaking platform to keep from stumbling. You mean enslaved, she said quietly. We prefer the term protective custody, the Vorthak replied without emotion. Humans will be given meaningful work suitable to their abilities. They will be housed and fed appropriately. They will receive medical care and basic education. In exchange, they will contribute their labor to projects that benefit the greater galactic community. And if we refuse? The chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming sounds that some of the alien species made constantly seemed to stop. The Vorthak's crystalline form shifted slightly, becoming more angular and somehow more threatening. Refusal would be most unfortunate, it said. Species that cannot be integrated peacefully into galactic society must be prevented from becoming a threat to others. Complete sterilization of Earth would be regrettable but necessary if humans choose the path of resistance. Hyojin closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her home world with its blue oceans and green continents. She thought of the billions of people going about their daily lives completely unaware that their freedom, and perhaps their very existence, hung in the balance. When she opened her eyes again, she forced herself to speak calmly. How long do we have to consider this offer? 30 Earth days, the Vorthak announced. During this time, all human space activity must cease. No ships may leave Earth's solar system. Any attempt to contact other species or to develop new weapons will be considered an act of aggression and will result in immediate action. The hexapod representative spoke up for the first time. The six-legged creature looked like a cross between a spider and a crab, but the size of a horse. The decision is final, its translator rendered in a flat mechanical voice. There will be no negotiations or appeals. Humanity will submit or humanity will be eliminated. Hee-Jin looked around the circle of alien faces, or what passed for faces among these beings. She saw no sympathy, only cold calculation. These were advanced civilizations. With technologies that made human science look primitive, they could probably destroy Earth's defenses in hours if they chose to. I will need to return to Earth immediately to deliver this message to my government, she said. Of course, the Vorthak agreed. You have served admirably as Ambassador Hee-Jin, Choi. When the transition period begins, you will be given a position of responsibility in the new order. Your knowledge of both human and galactic cultures will be valuable. The casual way it spoke of her future servitude made Hee-Jin's stomach turn, but she simply nodded. There was nothing more to be said here. The decision had been made, and from what she could see, there was no changing it. As she turned to leave the chamber, she noticed something strange. The Threnody representative, a gaseous being that communicated through color changes in its containment suit, had been silent throughout the entire proceeding. Now, as she walked past, she saw flashes of what her briefings had told her were colors associated with doubt or uncertainty among the Threnody. It was probably nothing, but she filed the observation away. The journey back to Earth took 18 hours aboard the fastest diplomatic ship available. Hee-Jin spent most of that time composing the message she would have to deliver to the United Nations Security Council and to President Seri Moon. How did you tell an entire species that they had been sentenced to slavery or death? When her ship entered Earth's atmosphere, she could see the lights of cities spreading across the night side of the planet. Millions of people down there living their lives, loving their families, working toward their dreams. In 30 days, all of that would end unless humanity could find some way to resist beings whose technology was centuries ahead of their own. The ship landed at UN headquarters in Geneva, where Commander Do-Hyun Kim was waiting for her. The military leader's face was grim as he helped her down from the ship. From your expression, I take it the news is not good, he said. Gather the emergency council, Hee-Jin replied. We need to contact President Moon immediately. And Kim send word to Dr. So-Young Park and Captain Min-Ho Lee. If we're going to have any chance at all, we'll need everyone involved in the alien contact program. As they walked toward the building, Commander Kim glanced back at the diplomatic ship. 30 days? He asked quietly. Hee-Jin nodded, not trusting herself to speak. 30 days to find a miracle or watch their world die. The galaxy had voted, and humanity had been found guilty of the crime of being human. Now they would learn whether the human spirit could find a way to survive what seemed impossible. Dr. So-Young Park stood in the underground laboratory complex beneath the Swiss Alps, staring at the alien technology samples that had been secretly collected over the past 5 years. The fluorescent lights reflected off the smooth surfaces of devices whose purposes humanity was only beginning to understand. Next to her, engineer Tae Woo-Yoon carefully dismantled what appeared to be a Vorthak communication device, with tools that looked primitive compared to the alien technology, but were actually far more sophisticated than they seemed. Show me what we have learned, Dr. Park said to the assembled team of scientists and engineers who had been working in complete secrecy since first contact. The existence of this facility was known only to a handful of Earth's leaders and the people who worked here. Even Ambassador Choi had not been told about the reverse engineering project that had been going on beneath her diplomatic efforts. Tae-Woo looked up from his workstation where circuit boards and alien components were spread out in careful order. The good news is that their technology follows physical laws we understand, he said. The materials are exotic but not impossible to replicate. The real breakthrough came when we realized they build everything to last for thousands of years. That makes their designs predictable but also inefficient. Dr. Park nodded. When the first alien artifacts had been obtained through careful trades and diplomatic gifts, the secret science team had expected to find technology so advanced they could barely comprehend it. Instead, they found designs that were elegant and durable but surprisingly conservative. It was as if the alien species had stopped trying to innovate centuries ago. "What about weapon systems?" asked Commander Do-hyun Kim, who had arrived from Geneva just hours after Ambassador Choi delivered the Council's ultimatum. The military man looked tired, but his eyes were sharp as he studied the displays showing human adaptations of alien technology. "That's where it gets interesting," replied Dr. Woo Jin-han from his position at a quantum mechanics station. The physicist had been working on understanding alien energy systems, and his discoveries had surprised everyone. Their weapons are powerful, but they're designed for ship-to-ship combat in open space. They assume their enemies will fight the same way they do with large fleets meeting in predetermined locations. Kim leaned forward. Meaning they have no experience with guerrilla warfare or asymmetric tactics, Dr. Park explained. Every galactic conflict in their records follows the same pattern. Two sides build fleets and meet in space for decisive battles. The winner takes control of star systems and the loser surrenders. They have never dealt with a species that refuses to follow those rules. In another part of the facility, Sergeant Ji-Hyun Nam was reviewing the global resistance network that had been quietly established over the past 3 years. The special operations leader had traveled to every continent, setting up hidden supply caches and training local resistance cells without them knowing the real reason for their preparation. They had been told it was preparation for possible alien invasion, but most had assumed it was just military paranoia. "How many people can we mobilize?" Commander Kim asked her. "Active resistance fighters number about 50,000 across all continents," Ji-Hai replied. "But we have support networks that could provide intelligence and supplies to 10 times that number. The aliens know about our major military bases and our official government facilities, but they have no idea about the civilian networks." Kim nodded. The plan that had been developed in secret was based on one simple assumption: that the galactic species would underestimate humanity, just as they had been underestimating Earth since first contact. Every interaction had shown that the aliens viewed humans as powerful but primitive. They had studied human wars, but only the large-scale conflicts between nation-states. They had missed entirely the thousands of smaller conflicts where determination and adaptability had overcome superior technology. Meanwhile, Captain Minho Lee was in orbit aboard what the aliens believed was a simple space station, but was actually the command center for Earth's hidden fleet. The ships looked like converted civilian vessels and mining platforms, but each one contained hybrid technology that combined human engineering with alien principles in ways the Galactic Council had never seen. "Status report on the fleet," Kim requested through the secure communication system. "All ships are operational and in position," Captain Lee replied from orbit. "The aliens have their monitoring stations watching our major space facilities, but they haven't detected the ships we've hidden in the asteroid belt and behind the moon. When they come expecting to find Earth's defenses concentrated around the obvious military targets, they're going to get a very unpleasant surprise." The centerpiece of Earth's secret preparations was a discovery made by Dr. Han 6 months earlier. While studying alien power systems, he had realized that their technology relied on principles that made perfect sense within their understanding of physics, but created vulnerabilities they had never considered. Human scientists approaching the same problems from a completely different angle had found ways to turn those vulnerabilities into weapons. "The quantum disruptor arrays are ready?" Dr. Park asked. "Better than ready," Dr. Han replied with satisfaction. "We've managed to create a cascade effect that will disable their ship's main systems without destroying them completely. The aliens have never encountered anything like it, because no other species has developed quantum mechanics theory along the same lines we have. What the galactic species failed to understand was that humanity's so-called primitive nature was actually its greatest strength. Where other species had developed along predictable evolutionary paths, humans had survived and thrived by adapting to impossible situations. The same traits that made them seem dangerous to the Galactic Council also made them uniquely capable of finding solutions to problems that had never been solved before." Taewoo held up a device that looked like a simple metal cylinder but contained technology that represented 5 years of human innovation. "This is the key to everything," he said. The aliens use quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication across galactic distances, but they never considered using it as a weapon. When we activate the network, every human resistance cell and every hidden ship will be able to coordinate their actions in real time. Commander Kim studied the device. And they won't see it coming. They can't see it coming, Dr. Park confirmed. Their understanding of quantum entanglement is purely utilitarian. They use it, but they never explored its offensive capabilities. It would be like us using electricity only for lighting and never discovering we could use it for weapons or communications. The irony was not lost on any of them. The Galactic Council had decided to enslave humanity because they viewed humans as too aggressive and unpredictable. Now that same aggressive unpredictability was going to be turned against them in ways they could never have anticipated. As the 30-day deadline approached, the alien fleets began moving into position around Earth. Long-range sensors showed massive ships taking up positions throughout the solar system. The aliens were clearly expecting token resistance followed by quick surrender. Their battle formations were textbook examples of overwhelming force designed to make resistance seem hopeless. They're positioning their ships exactly where our projections said they would, reported Captain Lee from his hidden command post. Every formation matches the patterns we've seen in their historical records. They're fighting the same war they've always fought. But this would not be the same war. In hidden facilities around the globe, human engineers were putting the final touches on weapons and systems that combined human creativity with alien technology in ways that neither species had ever imagined. Resistance fighters who had trained for years without knowing why were receiving their final instructions. Ships that looked like harmless civilian vessels were powering up weapon systems that could punch through alien shielding using principles the Galactic Council had never considered. The aliens had made their decision based on what they thought. They knew about humanity. They had studied human conflicts and concluded that humans were strong but predictable. They had observed human technology and decided it was powerful but primitive. They had watched human diplomacy and assumed that humans would eventually see reason and accept their fate. What they had never considered was that humans might have been studying them just as carefully and preparing for this exact scenario. The Galaxy was about to learn that there was a difference between being primitive and being unpredictable, and that difference was about to change everything. The first alien landing ships touched down in major cities around Earth exactly 30 days after the ultimatum had been delivered. The massive vessels descended from orbit with their energy shields glowing and their weapon systems clearly visible. Citizens in New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow watched from their windows as beings they had once welcomed as peaceful visitors now came as conquerors. The alien commanders expected to find human military forces gathered in defensive positions around government buildings and major installations exactly as their tactical analysis had predicted. Instead, they found empty streets and abandoned buildings. Commander Do-hyun Kim watched from his hidden command center as confusion spread through the alien ranks. Their landing had been perfectly executed according to standard galactic invasion protocols, but there was no one to fight and no one to surrender. The humans had simply vanished. Phase 1 is complete, reported Sergeant Ji-Hai Nam from her position in the ruins of what had once been the Pentagon. The building had been evacuated days earlier with all vital equipment moved to hidden locations, but to alien sensors it still appeared to be the center of Earth's military operations. All units are in position and waiting for your signal. The aliens had studied human warfare extensively, but they had focused on the large-scale battles between organized armies. They knew about tanks and aircraft and nuclear weapons, but they had never bothered to learn about the smaller conflicts, where humans had perfected the art of making superior forces bleed for every inch of ground. Now those lessons were about to be applied on a global scale. Dr. Young-Soo Kang activated the psychological warfare systems that had been carefully prepared for this moment. Across the galaxy, messages began broadcasting on frequencies the aliens used for official communications. The messages were not threats or demands, but something far more dangerous to the established galactic order. They were the truth. Citizens of the galaxy, the broadcast began in 17 different alien languages. You have been told that the species of your worlds joined the Galactic Council voluntarily. You have been told that your labor and resources contribute to galactic prosperity. You have been told that the Council protects you from dangerous species like the humans of Earth. The message continued with carefully documented evidence that humanity had gathered over 5 years of patient investigation, video recordings of enslaved populations on dozens of worlds, communication intercepts showing how the Council maintained control through fear and propaganda. Most damaging of all, testimonies from members of species that had supposedly joined the Council willingly, but had actually been conquered and enslaved, just as Earth was about to be. On worlds throughout the galaxy, beings who had never questioned their situation suddenly found themselves asking why their children were taken away for education and never returned, why their best minds were relocated to other systems for special projects, why their world's resources flowed outward to Council systems while they received only the minimum needed for survival. Meanwhile, on Earth, the real fighting was beginning. Captain Min-Ho Lee led the first wave of Earth's hidden fleet out of concealment. The ships looked like converted mining vessels and cargo haulers, but when they opened fire on the alien fleet, the weapons that emerged were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of the energy beams and particle weapons that the Council expected, the human ships fired quantum disruptor torpedoes that Dr. Han had designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in alien shield technology. The first alien warship to be hit by the new weapons simply stopped. Its shields collapsed, its engines went offline, and its weapon systems failed, all in the span of seconds. The ship was not destroyed, but it was completely helpless, floating dead in space as its crew tried desperately to understand what had happened to them. Direct hit on the Kelrani flagship, reported Captain Lee, as his ship executed a maneuver that would have been impossible for a normal civilian vessel. Their entire command structure is paralyzed. Admiral Subin Jiang took command of the space battle from her position aboard Earth's most advanced hidden warship. The vessel had been built in secret over 3 years using a combination of human engineering and alien technology that the Council had never seen. It looked like a harmless research station, but it carried weapons that could take on entire alien fleets. All units execute Pattern 7, Admiral Jiang commanded. The human ships spread out through the solar system, not seeking single decisive battle as the aliens expected, but engaging in hit-and-run attacks that struck at the alien fleet from unexpected directions and then vanished back into hiding. The quantum entanglement communication system allowed every human unit to coordinate perfectly, while the alien forces found their communications disrupted by the same quantum effects that powered the human weapons. For the first time in galactic history, a species was fighting back using principles that the established powers had never considered. On the surface of Earth, the guerrilla war was proving equally effective. Alien troops who had expected to face human armies in open battle instead found themselves under attack by small groups who appeared out of nowhere, struck hard, and then disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Sergeant Nam's resistance fighters used the sewers and subway tunnels beneath major cities to move unseen, while their weapons were enhanced versions of alien technology that the Council forces could not detect or defend against. Enemy casualties are mounting, but they're still not adapting to our tactics, Sergeant Nam reported from beneath the ruins of London, where her team had just destroyed an entire alien supply depot. They keep trying to establish control zones and fortified positions, but we hit them before they can get organized. The aliens were learning that controlling Earth would require far more resources than they had planned to commit. Every city block had to be fought for individually, and even when they thought an area was secure, human fighters would emerge from hidden positions and attack again. The Council had expected to overwhelm human resistance with superior technology, but technology meant nothing when the enemy refused to stand still long enough to be targeted. But the real shock came when reports arrived from other systems. The Q broadcasts that Dr. Kang had sent were having effects far beyond what anyone had expected. On Thranos, the gaseous beings who had seemed uncertain during the Council vote were rising up against their overseers. On Kelran Prime, the butterfly-like aliens who had supported humanity's enslavement found their own populations demanding answers about their children, who had been taken for special education decades earlier and never returned. Colonel Haywan, Lim was coordinating the liberation efforts on 12 different worlds using human ships that had traveled through space routes the Council didn't know existed. The alien powers had been so confident in their superiority that they had never bothered to explore alternative paths between star systems. Human explorers had found dozens of routes that cut travel time and allowed Earth's forces to appear where they were least expected. The hexapod colonies are in full revolt, Colonel Lim reported from her flagship as it emerged from a quantum jump near the Vega system. When they learned that their homeworld's government had been replaced by council puppets 50 years ago, they turned on their overseers. We're providing them with weapons and tactical support, but they're doing most of the fighting themselves. Engineer Tae Woo-yoon was aboard one of the liberation ships working to decode alien computer systems and unlock the truth about how the Council maintained control. What he found was worse than anyone had imagined. The 17 species that made up the Galactic Council were not representatives of free civilizations, but rather the descendants of the first species to be conquered by an even older power that had vanished centuries ago. The Council system is built on lies within lies, Tae-woo reported as his team broke through layers of encrypted files. The original conquerors established a system where enslaved species would police themselves and each other. The 17 Council species think they're the masters, but they're just as controlled as everyone else. This revelation spread across the galaxy faster than the Council could contain it. Species that had thought themselves the rulers of galactic civilization discovered they were prisoners in a system designed to perpetuate itself through fear and ignorance. The psychological impact was devastating as entire civilizations realized they had been living a lie for generations. The human strategy was working beyond all expectations. Instead of trying to defeat the galaxy in direct combat, Earth's forces were using the galaxy's own oppressed populations as allies. Every world that learned the truth became another front in a war that the Council could no longer control. Admiral Jang received reports from across known space showing the collapse of Council authority on dozens of worlds. The aliens who had come to enslave Earth were finding themselves called back to defend their own systems against populations that had learned the truth about their situation. Phase 3 is complete, she announced to the human command structure. The galaxy is in open revolt and the Council forces are in full retreat, but this is only the beginning. Now we have to decide what kind of galaxy we want to build from the ashes of the old system. General Kyung-ho Bae stood on the bridge of the Liberation Fleet's command ship as it approached the Council's stronghold system of Centauri Prime. 6 months had passed since the failed invasion of Earth, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. What had begun as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become a galactic revolution that was freeing countless enslaved species and toppling a system of oppression that had existed for millennia. The Council's response to the spreading rebellion had been predictably brutal. They had attempted to destroy entire worlds that refused to submit, but humanity's rapid expansion through the galaxy meant that human ships were there to defend the newly liberated populations. The Council's superweapons designed to terrorize species into submission proved useless against humans who treated impossible odds as just another problem to solve. Status report from all sectors, General Bae requested, as his ship moved through space lanes that the Council had considered absolutely secure just months earlier. The human ability to find new routes between star systems had revolutionized galactic travel and made it impossible for the Council to predict where the next attack would come from. Captain Dong-wook commanded the deep strike forces that had been hitting Council installations throughout their core territories. His ship specialized in rapid attacks on heavily defended targets using tactics that the aliens still could not counter effectively. "We've successfully liberated the prison worlds in the Rigel system," he reported. The populations there included species we had never encountered before. Some had been enslaved for over 1,000 years. Dr. Yoonji Shin was working with the freed populations to help them establish new governments and defense systems based on human principles of cooperation rather than domination. Her integration program was proving that species with completely different biologies and cultures could work together effectively when they were treated as equals rather than subordinates. "The former slave species are adapting to freedom faster than we expected," Dr. Shin reported from her mobile laboratory ship that traveled between liberated worlds. Once they understand that they can make their own decisions and keep the fruits of their labor, their productivity and innovation increases dramatically. Several species have already developed improvements on technologies they were forced to build for the Council. This was perhaps the most shocking discovery of the war. Species that the Council had dismissed as useful only for manual labor were proving to be highly intelligent and creative when given the opportunity. The Kelrani, who had been forced to manufacture weapons for centuries, had developed new defensive systems within weeks of their liberation. The Threnodi, whose gaseous nature made them ideal for working in hazardous environments, had created atmospheric processors that could terraform worlds in a fraction of the time Council methods required. The Council's greatest mistake was becoming increasingly clear with each victory. They had built their entire civilization on the assumption that some species were naturally superior to others, and that hierarchy was the only way to organize society. Humanity was proving that cooperation between equals was not only possible but far more effective than the Council's system of fear and control. President Siri Moon addressed the growing alliance of free worlds from Earth's capital, where representatives from hundreds of species were gathering to plan the new galactic order. The woman who had once faced the impossible choice between slavery and extinction now spoke as the leader of the largest military alliance in galactic history. "We did not choose this war," President Moon said to the assembled delegates. "It was forced upon us by beings who believed that might makes right, and that freedom was a privilege to be granted or withdrawn at their whim. But now that we are fighting, we will not stop until every enslaved being in this galaxy has the chance to determine their own destiny." The military situation was shifting rapidly in humanity's favor. Fleet Admiral Junseo Ryu commanded the combined liberation forces that now included ships and crews from dozens of species working together with an efficiency the Council had never achieved. The secret of human military success was not superior technology, but superior organization and the willingness to trust allies with important responsibilities. Council forces are retreating on all fronts, Admiral Ryu reported during the daily strategy briefing. They're consolidating around their core worlds, but their morale is collapsing. Many of their own species are beginning to question whether the Council system is worth defending. This was the final phase of humanity's strategy. Instead of simply defeating the Council in battle, the humans were making the entire system obsolete. By demonstrating that cooperation worked better than domination, they were removing the ideological foundation that had supported the Council for thousands of years. Engineer Tae Woo-yoon had established research facilities on liberated worlds, where human scientists worked alongside alien researchers to develop new technologies that benefited everyone, rather than just the ruling class. The innovations emerging from these partnerships were advancing galactic civilization faster than it had progressed in centuries under Council rule. The quantum communication network is now operational across 200 systems, Tae-woo reported from his main laboratory on New Kelran. Every world in the Alliance can now communicate instantly with every other world. The Council's monopoly on faster-than-light communication is broken. But perhaps the most important development was happening on the Council worlds themselves. Populations that had supported the system for generations were beginning to see broadcasts from liberated worlds showing what life was like under the human alliance. They saw species working together as equals, sharing knowledge freely, and prospering in ways that had been impossible under the rigid hierarchy of Council rule. The psychological warfare campaign led by Dr. Young-Soo Kang was having effects that went far beyond military strategy. By simply telling the truth about the Council system and showing alternatives, the humans were causing the entire structure to collapse from within. When beings who had been told they were superior discovered they were just as controlled as those they ruled, the resulting crisis of faith was devastating to Council authority. "We're receiving surrender requests from 17 Council worlds in the past week," Dr. Kang reported. "Their populations are refusing to fight for a system they no longer believe in. Some are even asking to join the Alliance as equal members." The speed of the collapse surprised even the humans who had planned for this possibility. The Council system had appeared stable for millennia, but it had been built on lies and maintained through ignorance. Once the truth was revealed and alternatives were demonstrated, the entire structure proved to be far more fragile than anyone had imagined. General Bay watched the tactical displays, showing the final council strongholds surrounded by Alliance forces. The beings who had once voted unanimously to enslave humanity were now trapped in their own core systems, begging for mercy from species they had oppressed for centuries. "Prepare for the final assault on Centauri Prime," he ordered. "But remember our rules of engagement. We're here to liberate, not to conquer. Any council forces that surrender will be treated according to Alliance standards." The irony was not lost on anyone in the human command structure. The species that had been condemned for being too aggressive was now teaching the galaxy about mercy and justice. The beings who had been called primitively unpredictable were demonstrating organizational skills that surpassed anything the advanced galactic civilizations had achieved. As the Liberation Fleet prepared for what might be the final battle of the war, reports arrived from across the galaxy. The revolution that had started with humanity's refusal to accept slavery had become something far greater. Entire sectors were declaring independence from the council system and establishing new governments based on cooperation and mutual respect. The galaxy that had voted to enslave Earth was discovering that freedom was not a privilege to be granted by the powerful, but a fundamental right that belonged to every sentient being. And they were learning this lesson from the species they had dismissed as too dangerous to remain free. The crystalline form of the Vorthak messenger that had once delivered the Council's ultimatum to humanity now stood in the same chamber where Ambassador Hai Jin Choi had learned of Earth's condemnation. But the roles had reversed completely. The Great Hall that had once housed representatives from 17 species now contained only a handful of beings whose authority had crumbled along with their empire. The Vorthak's crystal structure flickered with colors that human translators had learned indicated fear and desperation. President Siri Moon walked slowly toward the speaking platform where she had been told her species would be enslaved or destroyed. 9 months had passed since that day, and the galaxy had been transformed beyond recognition. The Council's empire of fear had collapsed, replaced by an alliance of free worlds that stretched across thousands of star systems. Now, the beings who had voted unanimously for humanity's enslavement were begging for the mercy they had never shown others. "We surrender unconditionally," the Vorthak announced through translation devices that were now human technology rather than council systems. The remaining council forces lay down their weapons and submit to the authority of the Galactic Liberation Alliance. President Moon studied the alien being that had once spoken with such certainty about humanity's fate. The Vorthak was no longer the confident representative of galactic authority, but a broken creature whose entire worldview had been shattered by humanity's unexpected response to oppression. Ambassador Yeon Woo Go stood beside the president as the official representative of the new alliance. The diplomat had been working for months to establish protocols for dealing with surrendering council forces and populations. The question of what to do with former oppressors was one that had divided even the human leadership. "The Alliance accepts your surrender," Ambassador Go stated formally. "All Council military forces will be disarmed and their crews will be given the opportunity to return to their homeworlds or to join Alliance reconstruction efforts as civilian volunteers." Dr. In Young Song had spent the past 6 months developing rehabilitation programs for populations that had lived under the Council system for centuries. Her research showed that many of the species that had supported oppression had done so because they genuinely believed it was necessary for galactic stability. They had been taught from birth that hierarchy and control were natural laws, rather than choices made by those in power. The hardest part is helping them understand that cooperation is possible, Dr. Song explained to the assembled Alliance leaders. Many of these beings have never seen examples of different species working together as equals. They assume that without strict hierarchy there will be chaos and violence. Fleet Admiral Jun Seo Ryu commanded the massive Alliance fleet that surrounded the Council's remaining strongholds, but his ships were not preparing for battle. Instead, they were distributing supplies and offering passage to refugees from the collapsed system. The same human military that had defeated the Galactic Empire was now working to ensure that its collapse did not cause unnecessary suffering. "We have received surrender requests from the last 3 Council worlds," Admiral Ryu reported. "Their populations are requesting Alliance protection and asking for help in establishing new governments. Many of them are afraid of retribution from species they helped oppress. This fear was not entirely unfounded. Some of the newly liberated species were calling for harsh punishment of their former masters. The Kelrani, whose children had been taken for centuries, wanted justice for generations of loss. The Threnodi, whose worlds had been stripped of resources, demanded compensation that the Council worlds could never afford to pay. But President Moon and the human leadership had made a decision that surprised both allies and enemies. Rather than seeking revenge, humanity would demonstrate the principles it had fought to defend. The same compassion that had driven humans to fight for the freedom of unknown species would now be extended to those who had tried to enslave them. "We did not fight this war to become the new oppressors," President Moon announced to the Alliance Assembly. "We fought to prove that every sentient being deserves the right to determine their own destiny. That principle applies even to those who tried to deny it to us." The decision was controversial even among humans. Commander Do-hyun Kim argued that the Council species should face consequences for their actions. Dr. So-young Park worried that showing mercy would be seen as weakness and might encourage future attempts at oppression. But Captain Min-ho Lee, who had led the space battle that began humanity's counterattack, supported the president's position. "If we become like them, then what was the point of fighting?" he asked during the heated debate. "We proved that cooperation is stronger than domination. Now we have to prove that mercy is stronger than revenge." The test of this philosophy came when the Vorthak leadership requested a private meeting with human representatives. The crystalline beings who had once spoken with absolute authority about humanity's inferior nature now came as supplicants asking for guidance on how their species could survive in a galaxy that no longer feared them. "We do not understand what you want from us," the lead Vorthak admitted to President Moon during the secret negotiations. "In all our history, when one power defeats another, there is conquest and subjugation. You have the strength to destroy us completely, yet you offer partnership instead. We do not know how to respond to mercy from those we tried to harm." President Moon looked at the being whose species had helped design the system that oppressed countless worlds for millennia. She thought of all the suffering that could have been prevented if the Council had chosen cooperation over control. But she also thought of the future that humanity was trying to build and the example they needed to set. "We want you to learn," she said simply. "Your species has knowledge and abilities that could benefit the entire galaxy if used constructively, rather than for oppression. We want you to join the Alliance as equals and help build something better than what came before." The rehabilitation program that Dr. Song developed became a model for how the new alliance dealt with former oppressor species. Rather than punishment or exile, they offered education and opportunities for redemption. Council species that chose to participate worked alongside their former victims on projects that benefited everyone. Engineer Tae Woo-yoon established joint research facilities where Vorthak crystal technology was combined with human innovation, and Kelrani precision manufacturing to create medical devices that could save lives across the galaxy. The same beings who had once enforced oppression were now working to heal the damage their system had caused. The transformation was not easy or immediate. Many Council worlds struggled with the transition from hierarchy to cooperation. Some species found it difficult to adjust to making decisions collectively after centuries of simply following orders from above. There were conflicts and misunderstandings, as different cultures learned to work together as equals. But humanity's example provided hope and guidance. The species that had been condemned for being too aggressive became teachers of patience and cooperation. The beings who had been called primitively unpredictable became leaders in developing new forms of government based on consensus rather than control. 5 years after the Council's surrender, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The rigid empire that had oppressed countless species for millennia had been replaced by a loose confederation of free worlds that cooperated voluntarily for mutual benefit. Trade flourished as species shared knowledge and resources freely. Technological advancement accelerated as different forms of intelligence worked together on problems that no single species could solve alone. President Moon stood in the same chamber where the Council had once voted for humanity's enslavement. but now it served as the meeting hall for the Alliance Council, where hundreds of species gathered as equals to make decisions that affected the entire galaxy. The transformation seemed almost miraculous, but it had been built through hard work, patience, and the willingness to extend mercy even to those who had shown none. The Vorthak messenger that had once delivered humanity's death sentence now served as an Alliance ambassador working to establish peaceful relations with species beyond the galaxy's borders. The being whose crystal form had once flickered with arrogant certainty now glowed with what human observers had learned to recognize as contentment and purpose. The humans taught us something we thought was impossible, the Vorthak told a gathering of newly contacted species from the Andromeda Galaxy. They taught us that strength comes not from the ability to dominate others, but from the willingness to lift them up. They showed us that mercy is not weakness, but the highest form of courage. The galaxy had voted to enslave Earth, believing that humanity was too dangerous to remain free. They had been right about humans being dangerous, but wrong about the nature of that danger. Humanity's true threat was not to galactic peace, but to galactic oppression. Their danger was not in their weapons, but in their ideas about freedom, equality, and the possibility of building something better. Now those same beings who had once knelt before council authority knelt instead before the principles that humanity had fought to defend. The galaxy had learned that mercy was indeed stronger than revenge, and